From America to Australia and everywhere in between, we bring you inspiring, informative interviews with accomplished South Asian diaspora spanning every field and walk of life. Welcome to the Desi Buzz Talk Show with your host, Dr. Shabana Parvez. Welcome back to the show. Today I have the absolute pleasure of speaking with Sanjyot Dunung. She's born in India, but made in America. Sanjyot is a proven, innovative, award-winning entrepreneur. She's a small business founder for EdTech businesses. She's dedicated to expanding learning opportunities for all. She serves on the board of directors for the National Small Business Association, which is the largest nonpartisan national business advocacy. Her global expertise has led her to advocate for ways that small businesses can increase exports and champion America as the partner of choice for countries around the world. She's also on the board of directors for the Truman Center for National Policy and the American Leadership Project. She grew up in Des Plaines, Illinois, where she learned the values of community citizenship, service, and deep pride in the promise of America. She's a proven, innovative, award-winning entrepreneur, and she is now running for Congress, representing the 8th Congressional District in Illinois. Welcome.
Thank you. Very nice to be here.
Thank you. So let's start a little bit about what you said. You were born in India. Your life was made in America. Talk a little bit about how your childhood experiences shaped your outlook on work, service, and leadership.
Absolutely. So, like many people, I'm a first-gen immigrant. I came to Des Plaines, Illinois at the age of 6 with my parents from India via actually England, where my dad got his master's. And they came in and they actually didn't expect to stay here. They thought they would just transit through and take a look. My dad was an architect and he was really ahead of his time. He wanted to take sustainable building materials back to India and help create more housing, affordable housing using sustainable building materials. So that's sort of the framework of how I think. He got a good job, not surprising, like many people. And one step next, we ended up landing and staying in Des Plaines, which is where I grew up. And I think that, your earliest beginnings, no matter where you are, shape who you are.
That's
Your
true.
family, your community, the schools you go to, everything, it shapes the values, shapes your priorities. And so it had a very rooting effect on me, the Midwest. Those of anybody's from the Midwest can tell you
Yes,
the
yes.
Midwestern values. We tend to be optimistic. We tend to be helpful. We
Hardworking,
tend to be about
optimistic.
community,
Yep.
right?
Yep. My kids were both born in Iowa. I lived there for quite a bit. Spent a lot of time
Yeah.
in the
So you
Midwest.
know exactly what I'm saying.
Right.
And I think that really sort of took hold in who I was from the earliest of days. I was very much rooted in service. As a young kid, I volunteered for everything. There was a bookathon, a bikeathon, a walkathon. My mother had a rare form of muscular dystrophy, so I used to organize backyard carnivals, if you will, for muscular dystrophy and things like that. So I was always looking to do something useful. And so were my parents. They volunteered for everything. They organized everything.
So you had good role models.
Yes.
And so it started really young. You said you came here at the age of 6. So, right. At that time, what kind of cultural adjustments would you say coming here may have influenced your personal and professional journey the most?
Yeah, so when I came, there were very few Indians. The wave of Indians and South Asians who have come into this area came in more the last 20 years. So we were a little before that. So there was actually nobody in my schools, junior high, grade school, or even high school, who were from different countries. Maybe they were immigrants, and I always say, unless you're Native American, we're all immigrants. It's a question of whether you came last year or 400 years ago.
Exactly.
But in terms of looking and having a different kind of sounding name and things like that, I was the only one. But to the credit of our community, I never felt like an outsider. I was brought right in. I fit right in. Kids can be both inclusive and also a bit challenging at times. So if anything, I got teased about being a nerd, a little too brainy. My parents were sort of the bookish kind. So I worked hard to make sure that I did things that were non-bookish, non-academic. And you kind of outgrow that. But I was really fortunate to have a community in a town that treated me just like everybody else. And I think that has shaped me too, which is we really have a lot more in common and the current media dialogue would suggest.
This
There's
is
a lot of
true.
partisan extremism, especially online. But when you talk to people, we really share the same values. We share the same hopes, the same concerns. And that's what I really focus on.
Great. So as you have been doing all of these different service activities. You were you were a single mom, you had three sons, you were leading in business, and you're caregiving for your parents. All of these roles, and this again, all women will resonate with some part of this, right? Because we
Right.
have always pulled in so many different roles. So, what from those life experiences, what kind of lessons did you learn from balancing all of those roles, and how does that tie into your leadership role, leadership style today?
Ever since I was young, I was always volunteering and doing different things, leading organizations. So, um, I've always enjoyed and I do multitask very well. And I'm a very high energy person.
Mm-hmm.
I love to do things. I'm also a writer, so I can do something that shows immediate results, and I can also do something that will show results in a year or two from now.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because I think, like a lot of people, this concept of balance, this concept of not always having to be on the go, took me a long time to learn.
Mm-hmm.
I was a 24/7 achieve, achieve, achieve kind of person. And I remember about 12 years ago, I decided I wanted to run the New York Marathon. That's what I do. I just wake up and have a bucket list. It was probably 13 and New York, just because I at that time was there. I was spending a lot of time there.
Mm-hmm.
For the last 10 years, I've been half in New York and half in Illinois, and now I'm
Mm-hmm.
fully in Illinois. But the concept of balance was not something that was on my radar. And I had a friend who's a mentor coach, Charles. He does adventure. He's Ironman's triathlons,
Mm-hmm.
9 yards, but he's also an executive coach, a CEO coach. And I started working with him to get ready for the marathon. And he introduced the concept of recovery.
Yeah.
And it was alien for me. The idea that you actually take time out mentally and physically to recover was not something I had grown up. My parents were always on the go. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe they were a little bit better at recovery and I hadn't seen it, but I just never did. And so like many people, had to almost hit burnout physically and sort of work wise to realize it's okay to take a half day off.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to make sure your body is not 7 days a week of training. And anybody
Right.
who's an athlete, I always, my boys tease me, you're not an athlete, you're active. So I will stand
Did
by
you
that. I
actually
will
run the
say,
marathon then?
I did run the marathon.
Oh,
I
great. It's
finished.
still on my bucket list. I've only done half marathon, so but it's yeah, it's really good. Maybe that's part of what keeps you going. But that's a really, really good what you talked about recovery.
Right,
And especially for we're talking the Desi community, right? Because we're and maybe as immigrants or whatever, we're always trained to like do more, do better, improve ourselves continually, and also there's the parental pressure, the societal pressure to achieve and to excel. And so there's never like a downtime,
right,
really. But when you do that, and as I think as a physician, I can, we'll talk about like that balance to recovery. And the marathon is a great, great training. It was life training for you, seems
right,
like, right? But it's like, um, when you have that time to recover, your body, I mean, physiologically needs that. And that also makes your mind, everything will become, your productivity actually improves, and that's one of the
absolutely.
things I try to, in my patients or clients that are like busy professionals. This is one of the problems that we have, right? And then you start wondering, why am I gaining weight? Why don't I have energy? Why is brain fog? And you're always on the go. It's like you do need your nervous system, all your detox processes, everything needs time to reset and recalibrate and just that one break. And I've obviously been a victim to the same thing myself. But when you do stop, then you have more clarity if you actually take time to not always be consciously going. Anyway, sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, you're absolutely right. And it does harness creativity. As I said, I'm a writer, fiction and nonfiction, mostly
Hmm.
nonfiction, but you're better at it. But I
Hmm.
think one of the biggest things to actually overcome is that guilt of taking the downtime,
Yes, that is actually the
right?
biggest thing, especially
And
for our community.
right. And once you say it's actually okay, I had another friend who sort of helped me understand, because as a small business, as an entrepreneur, you're on the go
Hmm.
all the time.
Right?
But then I learned to say, okay, I will do emails. Saturday morning, I'll sort of clean up And then the rest of Saturday, I would spend with the boys.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that allowed me to disconnect, engage in different activities, whether you're
Mm-hmm.
watching a soccer game or out on the ball field or at the one of the many, many birthday parties you end up going to
Right.
as a
Mm-hmm.
parent. But then I wouldn't do emails again until Sunday morning, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you've given yourself permission because you've gotten some basic things done. And then I would see what else I need to get done. So I do think that it's important to get that slotted recovery to the point where actually on Sunday night, when I look at my week ahead, I actually put in when am I
You
working out?
schedule it in.
When am I? Yep, absolutely.
Very
When's my
good.
yoga session? When's my run? When do I have? And sometimes it has to change week to week because you have different meetings. But
Mm-hmm.
I try to be very consistent with making sure it's on my calendar.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So you mentioned your parents as, looking to them for all the things that they did and they got involved and volunteered. Who are your other biggest inspirations, growing up? How did they continue to influence your path currently?
My dad was sort of a book, a columnist, sort of an intellectual philosopher, right? So I certainly grew up reading a wide range of authors, a lot about philosophy, of history. And so I'm always fascinated by people in history. I'm fascinated by the cycles of history. Certainly schooled on some of the ideology and the principles
Mm-hmm.
of nonviolent resistance from Gandhi. Um,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of those principles, I think, are very relevant today. Whether
Mm-hmm.
it's an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind, or sort of making sure that
Mm-hmm.
we form cohesive bonds. I've always been inspired by Nelson Mandela.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly everything that he's done is inspiring. But actually, one of the things that inspires me the most about him is that for 18 years, he sat in a jail not knowing if he would get out.
Mm-hmm.
For 18 years, he had to find hope and inspiration each
Every
and
single
every
day.
day
Yes.
without knowing what the future is. And that's a very hard thing to do, but a very important thing for us to do as human beings. And
Mm-hmm.
so those are the kinds of leaders. And I think somebody else who's inspired me when I was very young, and I actually had the pleasure of interviewing her when I was in high school, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
sort of a back to roots, was Indira Gandhi. And
Oh,
whatever you
wow.
yeah, I had the pleasure of
Amazing.
interviewing her one-on-one interview, which said to me a lot. So, regardless of what you think of her politics, what I think was most inspiring to me was she was a woman who was underestimated, assumed to be irrelevant and manipulatable and manageable. And she proved herself to be intelligent, capable, and a worthy leader.
Mm-hmm.
But the second part was I got the interview, and she could have seen me as a 16-year-old girl, and or 15, I think it was, and sort of dismissed me. But she treated me with the respect and courtesy of anybody else. And that level of humility,
Mm-hmm.
that level of kindness and respect is something that has lasted with me. You never know who's who,
Mm-hmm.
number one,
Right.
and never dismiss somebody because they don't fit your parameters of what you think should be taking up your time. And I think those were
Mhm.
life lessons that I have learned, both from some of the people I've had the chance to meet, but also some of the folks that I have had the pleasure of reading and been inspired by their work.
That is amazing. That's actually very, very good. Very helpful for any young people watching. This is really inspiring already so far. We're just barely getting started. Let's talk a little bit about business. Your
Absolutely.
company, Atma Global, has been
Right?
recognized by Fast Company as one of the most innovative companies. So what was that vision behind Atma Global, I guess, and
Right.
Atma Insights? Oh.
So basically, we started this, it's sort of the third rendition of sort of a moving company that adapts, and that's what entrepreneurs do, right? We keep
Mm-hmm.
reinventing and reimagining what the mindset needs. It's about bringing people together. So we focused on developing content, written text, video,
Mm-hmm.
training sessions, learning programs, but really to help bridge cultures. We use a very sort of proprietary social sciences methodology, but at the core, what we're really trying to do is help people understand how to communicate, interact, and operate more effectively across cultures.
Mm.
Say culture, I mean understanding between countries. The second you start to live outside your home country or your home culture, you adapt to the influences of a new culture. So for example, in the US, I've got some American values infused with my Asian values and familial values, right? So you're a mix of everything,
Hmm.
but also making sure that when we are talking about culture, we're talking about people who are still in their culture, what motivates them, how do they communicate? There's an actual methodology. So that's really what Atma Global does.
Hmm.
We do it for our companies, helping them with their customer service programs, teams across different countries, and making sure their teams can communicate more effectively. But
Hmm.
we're also used heavily in higher education, making sure that young people, when they're getting their textbooks on global business, international business, that our videos and our knowledge is infused in that.
Great. That's really good. Um, so what was the other, I think this is all really good for young people. As a entrepreneur, now you said a serial entrepreneur, what kind of challenges have you faced in building businesses, especially as we've gone through different economic cycles and
Yeah, absolutely. So my first was more of a boutique company where we did a lot of business, mainly between the US and actually at that time, companies and clients in the US, but then we had a partnership with an Indonesian firm, which was wonderful.
Mhm.
And then the South Asian or the Asian crisis and the currency crisis kind of changed the dynamics. That was at the same time that the whole dot-com world was exploding, the early days of the internet.
Hmm.
And we certainly rode that wave. My second company was VC funded, but I got introduced to the realities of the fact that 93% of VC-backed companies are male entrepreneurs. And by the way, sadly, the
Mm.
stat hasn't changed much, right?
Oh,
Because
really?
why? It,
Mm.
it hasn't changed for a couple of reasons. We'll talk about networks, but people invest and they do business with people that they understand
Yeah.
and that they connect with, right?
Right.
So if you're in the tech bro world,
Hmm.
there's a tech bro component. There's a bro component to it, if you
Hmm.
will. And certainly
Hmm.
if you speak the language, if you speak the values, and when I say language, I'm not talking about a linguistic language. I'm talking about a cultural
Hmm.
language.
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
It's a familiarity. So it's something that we still need to address. Um, Women lack the networks to be able to get in those circles. And it's something that that I'm part of a number of groups of trying to address how do we get more women to expand those networks, both within women, but also just
Hmm.
across industry and across functionality. But it's the networks that give people business, right?
Yeah, that is true.
You,
Yeah.
and that's what we need to do more
Need to
of.
more of that. Yeah. So in terms of business, you mentioned you're a writer and it's 17 books, international business books, at least as far as we know.
Yes.
How when you write, then how does that writing shape your perspective? How does it reflect your perspective on, as being a thought leader or an entrepreneur?
So it's funny, I'm a writer.
Hmm.
Even at my earliest days, I was journaling when I was 8 years old. Like it
Hmm.
was just part of how I process
Hmm.
information, ideas, and thoughts. And
Hmm.
I say that because a lot of people say to me, I want to be a writer. Absolutely go for it. First thing, just start writing, right? Just
Hmm.
start journaling your ideas, just start gathering them, thinking about things. It's shaped how I process information. I do love to write. I am a communicator. For me, business books are certainly easy because they're very methodical. You can put together a table of contents and then work on them section by section. Two of my books are textbooks, and one of the textbooks is in its 15th year of publishing. So I'm actually working on the fifth edition of it, International
Wow.
Business.
Hmm.
I did write a young adult novel, Maddie and Sayara,
Hmm.
which actually perhaps is a little bit nearer and dearer to my heart. And it really captures sort of my mission statement of life, if you will, which is
Hmm.
really to help make the world better for
Hmm.
everyone.
Hmm.
And the book, Maddie and Sayara was my first Afghan mentee. I
Hmm.
mentored Afghan women entrepreneurs in Afghanistan.
Hmm.
And Sayara was so inspiring to me that I named the book after her. But it was a
Hmm.
little bit about why should your life be any different just because of where you're born, right?
Hmm.
And really try to sort of address some of that inside of a very young adult, eighth grade novel kind of environment. So
Oh,
kind
that
of a
sounds
little bit
great.
of fun along with that.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So, but with writing, you're writing, your books are all published as hard books, right? Not digital books
Yes.
only, or Okay. So with
They're all held direct. So my first publisher was Simon and Schuster. It was doing
oh,
business in Asia. It was the business cultural, if you will, of
mhm.
understanding the 20 countries
Right.
at
Right.
that time that encompassed Asia. There were two versions of that. Then I did a few business books on entrepreneurship, and then
Hmm.
country specific ones
Hmm.
on different Asians. So as a business person professional, my area of expertise is really more Asia,
Hmm.
understanding the cultural nuances, the geopolitical issues, the
Hmm.
economic issues. Although as a company, we do the world, we have experts who
Right.
certainly focus and use our methodology. I'll give you an example for those who are kind of curious. What do I mean by this methodology? There is a real framework, and one of the leading thinkers is a Dutch anthropologist. We apply cultural anthropology. Name is Hofstede, and he applied different frameworks and different tools to be able to understand comparatively. It's not absolute, comparatively. So, what's one way? Let's say individualistic versus collectivist societies, right?
Hmm.
America, not surprisingly, is the most individualistic country around the world
Right.
comparatively. There's a
Hmm.
there's a graph that plots this. We champion individual rights, liberties, freedoms. It's enshrined in our Constitution. In
Hmm.
comparison, we'll go flip around to the other side of the world. Japan, for example, a very collectivist society. The
Hmm.
idea is that the greater good should always take precedence over the
Hmm.
individual. This
Hmm.
isn't a right or wrong. This isn't a better or worse. It's simply if you come from an individualistic society, you may have trouble understanding why somebody would sacrifice their individual needs for the greater good. And in flip, if you come from a collectivist or group oriented society, you may find that somebody who's individualistic is a little bit selfish, right? From that frame of work. It's not actually true. It's just simply comparative. So there are whole ways to compare societies, and where it can make a difference is in how we communicate, how we prioritize things, especially in the business environment. A collectivist society, for example, somebody may not share their opinion in a team meeting,
Hmm.
whereas somebody who's individualistic is the first to raise their hand and share their opinion and dominate the conversation.
Right. That's
So
interesting.
understanding those dynamics goes a long way in making sure there's smooth communications, making sure they're effective management styles.
So, how is that, you'd say, how would that tie into how global learning is going to be evolving in, as we go into the next decade, because there's so much more AI and digital
Right.
platforms. What do you see in that future there?
Yeah, so I think
EdTech
that
and global
what
learning.
Yeah, global learning. So a lot of what we did was on the learning side. I think that how people learn is very different in different environments. So some of those collectivist cultures, for example, you see them in Asia, you'll see them in the Middle East, Africa, where people will be less likely to share a personal opinion. They're less individualistic.
Hmm.
There is a challenge of getting people to feel comfortable with unique ideas, of being innovative, of standing out. That doesn't mean they're not innovative. I'm not suggesting that, but they have to teach that level of independence and innovation. So
Yeah.
I think that where it makes a difference, and we see this in education, is how do you balance the two?
Hmm.
Talk about AI. AI is a whole different animal when it
Hmm.
comes to education and learning, and we're still assessing the data and the research. I'm a huge fan of technology. I recognize the enormous value and the innovative ideas. At the same time, I think that AI is opening up a whole new set of doors that we need to be proactive about. We need to think
Right.
through what the guardrails are.
Hmm.
For one tiny example, we understood afterwards about the impact of social media, particularly on young people, particularly on mental health. We don't want to have a whoops situation, right? So how can we get ahead of this? And where it may will make a difference is on AI in learning. We want to make sure kids are actually still learning, right?
Hmm.
If you can resort to a chatbot answering your questions, what have you learned?
Right.
What have you learned in terms of common sense and reasoning, analytical capabilities?
Right.
These are all the skill sets that you're going to need to have good paying jobs.
Right.
So it's not just it's good for the student. It's really making sure they have the right tools and the right foundation to be productive in their future careers.
Hmm. So, continuing on that in terms of the global economy and the current global economy and small businesses. So there's some uncertainty about the global economy now. What's the advice you give to small business owners in this setting?
Yeah, so I sit on the board of of the National Small Business Association. We
Mm-hmm.
continue to focus on economic policy, jobs, trade, tariffs. I was on Biden's foreign policy working groups on this very issue. I think that what I'm hearing and what we're seeing everywhere is the uncertainty and the chaos is the most disruptive. Certainly, the tariffs I hear from people every day. They're getting in a shipment, and the pricing for their shipment, whether it's raw materials or whether it's finished goods, is changing literally overnight because the prices are having to be calculated. So the uncertainty and the chaos is really, really detrimental for our small businesses and businesses of all sizes, but also for our families. You
Mm-hmm.
can't plan if you don't actually know what you're dealing with. So a disruptive administration that literally changes its mind between breakfast and lunch is counterproductive to economic strength and business strength. Having said that, I'm all for efficiencies and getting rid of waste, but I think there's more common sense, responsible ways to implement that. So for a lot of the small businesses we're seeing is everybody's sort of in a status quo. They're not
Mm-hmm.
doing anything. They're not hiring.
Mm-hmm.
They're not firing. They're not making investments in AI or technology. They can't plan with
They're being
any level of
stagnant.
certainty.
Mm-hmm. So as we talk, let's go into then policies for small businesses. What do you
Yeah.
think in terms of U.S. regulations, governmental regulations for small businesses? What kind of urgent changes do we need?
So for one thing, that what a lot of what we focus on is how do we make sure that we have common sense regulations. At
Mm-hmm.
times you do need regulations. We all want our water to be safe, right? That's a
Mm-hmm.
common sense regulation. But there are regulations that are not sensible
Necessary.
and are counterproductive to business.
Mm-hmm.
What do I mean by that? So for example, we talk a lot about housing. And
Mm-hmm.
how do we build more housing? How do we make cheaper housing? Well, it may surprise people to know, particularly I'm sitting here in Illinois, from one town to the next, there can be differences in building code, zoning, and restrictions. Well, you
Mm-hmm.
can't build very efficiently if each town has their own zoning rules. If you're a
Mm-hmm.
construction company,
Mm-hmm.
if you're trying to build things. So, really making sure that there's ease of regulation within a state, but also across states. More and more, you're
Mm-hmm.
seeing companies, even small businesses, want to sell to neighboring states, want to sell around the country. I mean, we're a small company, but we sell around the country and we actually sell globally, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you want to know that the rules are the same.
Mm-hmm.
Privacy rules between the US and Europe, for example, needs to be consistent, but it needs to be common sense and not burdensome. I think
Mm-hmm.
right now we're seeing one of the biggest issues of that is very challenging for a lot of small businesses is this chaotic immigration policy,
Mm-hmm.
where, just arbitrarily changing visa requirements. The idea that there's $100,000 fee for H-1Bs is not only unconstitutional, but it's actually discriminatory against small businesses because they can't pay for something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
we're working to address that to make sure that we get rid of it. I am really about pro-legal immigration reform. What that really means is
Mm-hmm.
everybody wants immigrants. We need them, skilled and unskilled. We should have faster pathways to um, visas, green cards, and citizenship. Nobody should be waiting 10 years for a green card or longer. But we want everybody to play by the same rules. We want it to
Mm-hmm.
be fair and we want to make sure that it's transparent. We want border
Mm-hmm.
security. We want humane immigration reform. That's a big issue for small businesses. They
Right.
are arbitrarily seeing their workforce being taken by a really inhumane ICE and administration. So
Mm-hmm.
that level of job security, we need to make sure that we have worker security too.
Mm-hmm. So what other impacts you think are any other impacts you say from these international trade policies that are, on small businesses in America? Mostly that the uncertainty with immigration as well as the uncertainty of pricing, primarily.
Right. Pricing and tariffs, right? If you
Tariffs,
are
yeah.
selling to another country, we see this with whether you're a farmer, whether you're agricultural, but also whether you're manufacturing. If what you can sell to a different country is impacted literally overnight by either a tariff or a restriction, you can't grow your business. You won't
Mm-hmm.
be able to invest. So we're seeing a lot of concerns about that. I know that for us as an EdTech company, it's a lot of rules around technology.
Mm-hmm.
We want people to use the WTO. We want the World Trade Organization use those forums to make sure there's sensible regulation,
Mm-hmm.
make sure it protects consumers, make sure it protects companies, but make sure it's consistent across all countries.
Mm-hmm.
Would be more productive for the global economy. I
Right.
know there's a lot of issues about trade these days, right? Everybody sort of is a little sour on global trade.
Mm-hmm.
We can improve it. There's no question, right? We can make it more fair. We can tweak it. Technology has impacted it quite a bit. But let's remember that in the last 80 years, global trade has transformed the world. People's standard of living everywhere in the US and globally has increased exponentially.
Mm-hmm.
So there have been improvements. I liken it a bit to a marathon, right? We're not on mile 26 of having said mission accomplished. We're somewhere around mile 12, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have done very well, but we still have a long way to go. So the question
Mm-hmm.
isn't get rid of it. The question is, how can we improve it to make sure that it adapts to the new technologies, it adapts to our changing circumstances, and what do we need to do with vocational training, making sure that young people have more pathways
Mm-hmm.
to training and learning, and how do we make sure that people have the jobs and the security that they need to live the lives that they hope to live.
Right. So that's really a good goal, and let's hope we get closer to that mile
Yeah.
26. Um, so as you've been on the UNICEF USA Truman Center for National Policy, the boards, how has serving on those boards shaped your approach to how you see policymaking and leadership?
Absolutely. Well, so I've been on, I was on UNICEF very early on, and I was always an active volunteer and supporter. I've always championed women and children's issues, mainly because I think that the children are our future generation isn't just a cliche, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
it's true. I have three boys of my own, and I think that how we shape and create a future for them, and it's both academic, it's spiritual, it is their mental well-being, but it's also their physical well-being.
Mm-hmm.
If you strengthen a child in their first 5 years, what do I mean by strengthen? Immunizations, good, clean water, making sure they have healthy food. Those are the foundational things that will help them live productive lives and be effective. I just mentioned that the last 80 years have seen everybody's boats lifted globally. It's
Mm-hmm.
because of this sort of convergence of efforts to make sure that people had access to good immunization. It protects everybody. When people are immunized in their country, it reduces the risk of disease, not only for those people, but also for anybody traveling in and out, and it reduces the global risk of that particular disease. So we can't underestimate the value of following science and the data. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a very important thing. All of these different boards have helped me understand how strategy, how vision, and how sort of trying to do what's right for the common good can help us move the ball forward. And that's really
Mm-hmm.
all we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
We may not solve every problem in our lifetime. My dad always used to say, some of these things will outlast us as problems, but our
Mm-hmm.
job is to make incremental progress so that we can hand the baton to the next generation and say, hey, we've moved it a little bit forward.
So
And I
your
think
progress over perfection is
exactly.
intentionally yeah, it's a goal. That's true. Sorry. You were as problem solving, you were talking about, you talked a lot about just bringing common sense back. So what does that look like to you? And as you run for Congress, this mindset of common sense problem solving, what does that look like? How do you plan to
So
do that?
yeah, absolutely. So, I got very frustrated with sort of the last few years, and if not longer, with what I consider solvable problems. I don't think they're easy to solve, but they're solvable. One is
Mm,
immigration.
mhm,
We have been talking about immigration reform for years and years, probably even
mhm,
longer than I can remember.
mhm,
But we're not actually moving the ball forward. And why not? Oftentimes, it's a wide and mixed result of egos, of competing political interests,
mhm,
of apathy. That's what I'm talking about, common sense. Common
mhm,
sense is I'm a workhorse, I'm not a show horse. Let's just roll up our sleeves. We all want to solve this problem. Let's just solve it together. Let's pass and deliver
Mhm.
comprehensive immigration reform. Let's
Mhm.
talk about education reform. How do we improve our curriculums? How do we improve results for our kids?
Yeah.
We talk about schools a lot, and yet the US is slipping
Mhm.
on science and technology and on English. Why? We're investing more than any other country because we often fiddle with curriculum that's untested. Let's go back to the basics of good, solid curriculum that's tested, that's verified, research driven, and let's make sure that every child has a strong foundation in these. There's an old saying, until the age of fourth grade, you are learning to read. Fourth grade on, you are reading to learn.
Mhm.
Right. So let's make sure every fourth grader has very solid reading skills. No more sort of testing new ideas because you're losing a whole generation of kids who didn't get that foundation. And we're
Mhm.
seeing the impact of that now.
Hmm. That is interesting. Yeah, that's part of like your social scientist coming in. You have all
Yeah.
these hats, now like so now that you're running as well for
Right.
office, do you feel like your identity, either as an entrepreneur or your social scientist, your political leader, how you're balancing those identities as as you're trying to think about how you can impact your community and other, communities in the
Right.
country.
So I think that if ever a moment was in my life, and if you had asked me a year ago, would I be running for the office? The answer would I would have said no. I might have done an appointment, I might have done anything else.
Right.
But opportunity plus what I consider a need meant that I had to really get involved and sort of meet my moment. But meeting my moment also meant that I am probably the best qualified at this very moment because of all those experiences,
Hmm.
because of those skill sets. What do I do as a social scientist? A lot of what we do is understand business, education, technology, global affairs, and how that impacts society. Because right now we have a world that's being destroyed in front of us, right? The whole world order, everything in this country is being disrupted. It's being changed. The question is, what do we want to build going forward? We certainly don't want a rehash of what was. Um,
Hmm.
we don't want just a band-aid. So people are really talking about how do we bring in new ideas, new leaders, new ways of doing things to make sure that we're positioned for the future because of technology, because of AI, because
Hmm.
of changing geopolitical dynamics. And
Right.
I think that experience combined with, I always say to people, especially those who are, just starting in their career and they want to do public service, I always tell them, get some private sector experience.
Yeah.
Public service is excellent, but you are more valuable when you have diversity of experience, diversity of ideas, and diversity of knowledge. And I think that makes a big difference. We see a better mix in Congress, in government
Hmm. Hmm.
when people bring in, it might be a doctor, right? You might be a
Yeah.
doctor, you might be an engineer, you
Right.
might be any profession, social scientist, I hope, from Illinois 8. It might surprise you to know that in Congress, 40% or more are lawyers. I have lots
Mhm.
of friends who are lawyers, wonderful people, but that's a little over indexed on legal. And there's a difference in the mindset, right?
Mhm.
Lawyers by default are very good at preventing problems, right? Their whole thing is mitigation reduction,
Mhm. Right.
but they're not innovators. They're not thinking outside the box. They're not problem solvers. That team requires a different mindset. So somebody who, as you said, we were delighted to be recognized as one of the most innovative companies, but that innovation mindset, that creativity has fueled all my entrepreneurial ventures. And that's a can do. So you
Mhm.
see a problem, and the answer isn't can't do it, it's can do. How do we do it? And I
Right.
think we need more of that kind of an approach, especially in government. So I really
Mhm.
encourage people diversity of experience, get some training, get some knowledge, run a business, work for a company, work for something outside of the not-for-profit world.
Mhm. So let's go back to maybe a little bit more fun or maybe less stressful time. Uh, Even with starting your own business, you said your first business really as a babysitter, right? Babysitting
Yes.
toddlers at the age of 10.
Yeah.
So right now, and as a seasoned entrepreneur and, politician now coming up, what if you weren't doing this, what would you possibly have chosen? What would be an
So
alternative career for you?
You were right. I was always trying to have like a lemonade stand, sell books, and that was like a backyard daycare on
Hmm.
Sunday mornings in my parents' in our family home. And I
Hmm.
brought toddlers over
Hmm.
and babysat them with two other kids, and we charged 50 cents for 2 hours.
Wow.
I had a lot to learn about pricing. I had no idea. Now that I was a parent, I realized that was like gold. I was
Hmm.
giving parents the best thing in the world, a cup of coffee and a newspaper without your toddler. Great.
Hmm. Hmm.
What would I have done if I hadn't been an entrepreneur? My first career love has always been I wanted to be an astronaut.
Oh.
I am fascinated with exploring. So
Hmm.
maybe it's be an astronaut, be an explorer. If I went back 500 years, I'd probably be a guy, hopefully, and
Hmm.
then be an explorer because I don't think, unfortunately, women had a lot of pathways to be explorers a couple hundred years
Right.
ago.
Hmm.
But I love uncovering new things, and to me,
Yeah.
being an astronaut, going out into the wild frontier, is exciting. So William Shatner going up in space at 90, that's a dream come true for me.
Right. So it's still possible. Yep.
It's still
It
possible.
still
It's a
is.
bucket list.
Yep. What about let's get back to the beginnings. Made in India, born in India, made in America. So which one is there any specific tradition either from here or in India, like a specific cultural tradition that you enjoy that you really hold dear or that you like to enjoy with your family or practice?
It's funny. It's probably a merger of both because my whole life, I've actually built bridges between cultures and
Mm-hmm.
including my own family. And I think my parents did it. So the tradition, and I did it with my kids too, is a Saturday night dinner with at home. My mother used to always bake homemade pizza, which she made a little bit with an Indian style sauce, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And we played board games. And so those are sort of the family rooted
Pizza
things.
and family game night. That's great.
It's family game night. I grew up on it. We always played Monopoly, by the way, Monopoly
Mm-hmm.
or Life. And
Mm-hmm.
and certainly my boys, we continue the tradition, probably added Sorry and Trouble and a
Mm-hmm.
couple of other games to that
Mm-hmm.
too. But
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very much rooted in family. And by the way, both cultures cherish family, right? It's
Yes, of
just the
course.
way you exhibit it might be a little bit different. But food and the spirit of camaraderie, I think, transcends every language, every culture, and
Oh
is
yeah,
global.
food definitely.
Yeah.
So you are very passionate about global culture. So if you could live in another country for a year, what country would you choose and why?
Wow. Um, oh, that's a tough one. I
Mhm.
happen to love a lot of places. I happen
But
to
for a year
geographic
though, now it's not just to visit. If you could actually
for a
live there for
year.
1 year.
So I love ancient cultures and ancient history because I love all of that. And I also love aesthetic beauty, just natural beauty,
Hmm.
um, things that you might find in the southern part of New Zealand. I'm going to have to cheat a little bit. I'm going to have to tell you that I'd like to be on a boat for a year. I'm
Uh-huh.
going to
So you could
go.
explore more countries.
Yes.
Yeah, to be
Uh,
the explorer. Okay.
yes. I don't know if
So
that's
you
cheating,
could
but
live on the
it is
ocean then.
I would actually love a boat. My bucket list remains Antarctica. I'll get there very soon. I probably need a different kind of boat to get there,
Hmm.
but I love to explore new places, meet new people,
Hmm.
aesthetically, just enjoy the world. And I happen to love the water. I think
Hmm.
it's one of the most majestic gifts of nature.
Right. That is you're continually. Did you enjoy that movie Life of Pi? That was funny. It
Yes,
was interesting.
maybe not quite so
N-
sad as that
Not
one.
quite so desolate, however.
Yes,
Better equipped, right?
yeah, I think
Um,
I'd take a few people with me.
right. You mentioned your sons too with the board games. Have any funny stories or anything, funny learnings because, your mom, you have 3 boys, any funny stories that you want to share? Anything or anything that you've learned from them because obviously we don't just learn from those older than us.
Yeah,
Have
that's
they
actually a
taught you
good
anything?
question. Yeah, I would say it's kind of an interesting thing. I'm an only child. I wished I had brothers and sisters,
Mm-hmm.
but obviously my parents couldn't. And my parents were very bookish, which I've said already. So we were kind of a serious family, if you will. Like our dinner table conversations were filled with philosophical, historical discussions. My dad would be tutoring me in essence, right? My boys, and if anybody's had 3 boys or 2 boys or more, um, yes, they're academic and we can have very philosophical discussions, but they are pranksters. jokesters. And even as grown-up kids now, they are adults, they're always making mischievous things amongst each other and pranking me and joking. So if anything, they've taught me to lighten up.
And yeah,
They've
to
taught
laugh a
me
little
that
bit, right?
laugh a little bit, be
Yeah.
silly. It's okay. And I think that culturally too, right? Culturally, we don't always value that. And I don't think it's just Indians or South Asians. I think many cultures, when you're
Hmm.
an adult, you're supposed to be an adult.
Serious, right?
Right.
Hmm.
I am grateful that they've taught me to just kick up my heels and be silly.
Hmm.
And I love that part of them,
Yeah, that
except for
that
when
is
I'm the butt of
really
jokes all the
valuable
time.
lesson as
But
well.
even then,
It ties right into the same thing with the running or the exercise. It's just taking time to do nothing or just
right.
being laughing. Again, physiologically, it's really good. Like all the muscles in your face get
Yeah.
activated. It decreases, like the nervous system. It calms your nervous system down. It's actually very healing, even if you have
Yes.
chronic disease stuff. Laughter, it truly is medicine. So that's a very good thing that your son's got taught you. So as we're
And
getting
actually, I
close,
would say my dad also used to have like a joke of the day. That was his way of introducing it into the family.
hmm.
But he did try that very same thing.
Okay, cool. Um, then what would you say after all of this, looking back at your life, is the secret to your success? If you had to, say one thing or two things, that's the secret to your success so far.
Success is a very fluid word, right? There are days when you feel successful and there are days when you don't feel successful. And having gone through 9/11 and the economic downturn from that and COVID and certainly the 2010 recession, I think the one word that would probably describe me is tenacious. I don't give up, right? I meditate. I found different ways to stay strong. I call my runs when I'm running a meditative run.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much about grounding yourself so that the band is a little bit more narrow. You don't get you don't sort of go too wild when something's good, but you also don't sink too deep when maybe you've had a difficult week, two, or a year. So I would say tenacious and perseverance and
Mm-hmm.
belief, right? I believe
Right.
in whatever I'm doing or wherever I'm headed
Mm-hmm.
is the right thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that's probably what defines how I see anything, whether it's running a company, running a race, or campaigning.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say for young women, young women or young men or immigrant entrepreneurs who are wanting to lead in business or politics and have aspirations? What kind of message would you give to them?
Um, First, believe in
Advice,
whatever you're.
advice.
Yeah. So believe in whatever you're doing, but don't worry so much about the end goal of where you're going to go. I think sometimes people want to plot their whole path, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not so easily plottable. Life comes with twists and turns, some of
Mm-hmm.
your own doing and some that you are,
Not in
you're
control
impacted
of.
by external
Mm-hmm.
factors.
Right.
Um, but also stay very humble, stay curious and always be learning. I'm a champion. It's not just a business that I run, right? I'm a champion of lifelong learning. I read anything and everything. I talk to anybody who will talk to me. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have to agree with them. They don't have to agree with me. But mutual respect, mutual understanding allows you to get open to new ideas. I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of what I see sometimes with young people today is a rigidity in their thinking as if they've already figured it all out. And my
Right.
dad taught me very early on, stay humble and humility is recognizing that you will adapt and change, and that's okay.
Yeah, because that's what keeps you open to learning too. If you think you know everything, you can't get any more. You have to continually learn, adapt, Yeah, that's great.
Exactly.
Humility, and you, yeah, definitely
Yeah.
embody that. And last thing, finally, if you could summarize your campaign and or your life mission, in like say one sentence for your district, the people of Illinois' 8th district, what would it be? Like a one-liner or something, a one
Yeah.
summary sentence.
A summary sentence, my whole philosophy is always been I'm somebody who drives towards trying to make the world a better place. Right. So I think that really defines my life, my work, and the campaign. Um, uh, you know, driving down a little and drilling down a little bit for the campaign. It's using common sense, responsible change and innovation mindset. But I think that I'm really governed by wanting to build bridges, wanting to focus on our shared values. Doesn't matter who you are, what's in your bank account, where you came from, or how you think. It's what do we hope for together? And most people want a better future, right? For
Mhm.
themselves, for their family, and for their community. So I'm really driven. If I had to pick a sentence, it would be more of a clause. And I'm driven by wanting to make the world a better place for everyone.
By building bridges and based on shared values and shared
Right.
goals. Perfect. That's good. Okay. So it was an absolute pleasure. I don't know
Thank
why I
you.
just had a little lag there. Okay. Absolute pleasure talking to you and can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you so much. And thank
Mhm.
you very much for having me. It was a
Mhm.
pleasure.
Yeah.
Loved
Thank
our
you.
conversation.
Oh, yeah. It was very good. Thank you.